Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. Before we get started, don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from and what time it is there. That way, YouTube will keep showing you more stories like this. Now, let's begin. I am Philip, 34 years old, and my wife, Jessica, 38 years old. We have a stable life in the suburbs of Massachusetts. My wife and I have been married for 12 years and have waited 5 years to welcome a little angel. Finally, the miracle happened. My wife is pregnant. When we found out, we cried and hugged each other like two children. I promised Jessica that I would throw the biggest gender reveal party she had ever seen, a party to make up for the waiting and pain we had endured. Jessica and our child deserved that. I spent 3 months planning everything. Our backyard was decorated with string lights and balloons. The food was prepared by a private chef. There was expensive wine and a 5-tiered cake. And the highlight was a small plane that would fly overhead and release either pink or blue smoke, announcing to the world whether we were having a son or a daughter. No one knew the color of the smoke in advance. The doctor had sent me the results in a sealed envelope, and I passed it on to the event company. I wanted my reaction at that moment to be real. The night before the party, I couldn't sleep. There was something about the dream that woke me up, sweating and gasping for breath. I couldn't remember what it was, just fragments of images, distant sounds, and a terrible feeling that something was wrong. Jessica said it was just the nerves of soon-to-be fatherhood. Maybe she was right. The day of the party, everything started perfectly. The weather was ideal, with a clear sky, not a cloud in sight. Nearly 100 guests, including friends, partners, and family, gathered in our backyard. My mother flew in from California, and Jessica's sister came from London with her 2 kids. Some college friends, whom we hadn't seen in years, were also here, all sharing our happiness. I looked at Jessica in her long white dress, her belly protruding, her face radiant. She looked amazing. I felt incredibly lucky and grateful to God for this happiness we had found. The party started at 3 p.m. Laughter and joy were evident on everyone's face. As the exciting moment drew near, everyone started looking up at the sky. I could feel the excitement in the air. Jessica held my hand tightly, her fingers cold and trembling. 1 minute to go, the event coordinator announced. Everyone started counting down, and Jessica hugged me tightly. I could feel our baby kicking lightly, as if it too was excited. Then I heard the sound of the plane engine in the distance. Everyone cheered as the small plane appeared in the sky, heading toward us. My heart raced for the moment we had waited so long for, but as the plane got closer, I felt that something was wrong. It was flying much lower than planned, and it seemed to be struggling. The engine was louder, at times stuttering, at others roaring. Before I could finish my sentence, there was a small explosion from the plane. People gasped. Then smoke started pouring out. Not pink or blue, but thick, dark smoke. The plane swayed in the air, clearly in trouble. "Everyone move back," I shouted, pulling Jessica into the house. But most of the guests stood there mesmerized by the scene in the sky. In a terrible moment, the plane seemed to stop in mid-air. Then, from below, something began falling. Black objects rained down into the yard. I squinted, trying to make sense of it in the dark, and then realized the horrifying truth. It was pieces of flesh, dozens, maybe hundreds of pieces. Then came fingers, toes, pieces of darkened skin from decomposition, and hair, long strands still attached to scalp fragments. The first scream rang out. Then everyone screamed. Panic took over. People scattered, trying to escape the horrendous shower falling from the sky. I pulled Jessica inside, slamming the back door behind us. She was trembling violently, holding her belly to protect our unborn child. Through the window, I could see the backyard now looking like a scene from a horror movie. Body parts scattered across the grass, stuck to the white tables, and pastel-colored balloons. The police arrived within 15 minutes. They cordoned off the area and began their investigation. Our guests were taken for medical checks and interrogations. Jessica had to be hospitalized due to shock. I stayed at the scene, trying to make sense of what had happened. The answer came at midnight, when an FBI agent pulled me aside. "Mr. Lawson, we've identified the origin of the objects that fell from the plane. It appears they were bodies from a graveyard in Maine. About a month ago, there were reports of grave robberies there, but we never thought, who did this? We found a letter in the pilot's cabin. He had committed suicide after dropping those things. The letter was addressed to you." "To me? Why? Do you know someone named Thomas Caldwell?" My heart skipped a beat. My mind spun, and my ears rang after hearing that name. No one knew that before Jessica, I had deeply loved a man named Thomas Caldwell. We met in our sophomore year of college. Thomas was an excellent literature student, and we spent 3 years together. But when we graduated, I faced pressure from my family, especially my conservative father. I was accepted into law school, and at a celebratory party, I met Jessica. She was beautiful, smart, and represented everything my family wanted. I found myself wavering, and after many sleepless nights of thinking, I chose the easier path. The way I broke up with Thomas was horrible. I didn't have the courage to tell him the truth, that I had chosen a life that met my family's expectations instead of true love. In the following months, Thomas began sending letters and messages. At first, they were pleading. Then they turned to anger, and eventually to threats. He showed up at my law office, sent flowers to Jessica's house with strange notes. I had to get a restraining order, and then Thomas disappeared. 12 years passed with no sign of Thomas, and I buried my fears and guilt deep within me. I built a new life with Jessica, focused on my career and marriage, and gradually convinced myself that I was happy with my choice. But on those rare, sleepless nights, Thomas's face would still haunt me. Jessica never knew the whole truth. I couldn't let her know it was my fault, that the terror we had endured was due to my past. Today, our daughter turns 1 year old. Our family has moved to a town over 600 miles away from our old home. We named our daughter Hope. Jessica still wakes up at night from nightmares. I've never told her everything. I can't. Instead, I bear the fear alone. That's my punishment. The price I have to pay for the lies and the secrets. I'm David, a senior majoring in architecture at a university in Columbus, Ohio. That summer, instead of heading home, I chose to stick around the city to work and save up some cash for next school year. One weekend night in late July, my roommate Marcus dragged me along to a friend's party at a mansion out in the Cincinnati suburbs. I wasn't big on crowded parties, especially with a bunch of strangers, but Marcus wouldn't let it go. Eventually, I gave in. The house hosting the party was in a pretty upscale neighborhood, full of big, classic Victorian homes. The Miller family's mansion, where the party was happening, was easily one of the most impressive around. 3 stories high, huge windows, and a sharply pitched roof. Right from the second I stepped inside, I felt uneasy. The pounding music Dim lighting and a sea of unfamiliar faces quickly gave me a splitting headache. After struggling for about an hour to blend in, my head felt even worse. I decided to look for somewhere quiet to get away from the chaos. The first floor was too loud, so I quietly slipped upstairs to the second floor. The hallway up there was dark and still, the only sound coming from the muffled music downstairs. I slowly made my way down the hall, hoping to find an empty room or a bathroom to catch my breath. At the end of the corridor, there was another narrow staircase leading up to the third floor. I climbed up. It seemed like nobody ever used the third floor. It was cramped and the ceiling was lower. As I crept along the dark hallway, a strange sound caught my attention from the far end, like metal scraping against something. My pulse quickened a bit, but I convinced myself it was probably just a mouse or the wind rattling through the old roof. But as I got closer, the noise grew sharper and clearer. At the end of the hall, there was a small room with the door slightly open. A faint glow from outside seeped in through a skylight. I crept closer, leaning forward to peek through the gap in the door. My heart nearly stopped when I saw two shadowy figures moving around inside the room. Both of them wore masks and were busy rifling through drawers and closets. One had a large cloth bag and was shoving stuff into it, while the other was prying open a skylight, probably how they'd gotten into the house. I stood frozen in place, barely daring to breathe. A whirlwind of thoughts raced through my mind. Should I run downstairs and warn everyone? But what if the burglars heard me and chased after me? Did they have weapons? While I was hesitating, one of them suddenly turned toward the door, toward me. Instinctively, I stepped backward, bumping into a small table behind me in the hallway. The lamp crashed onto the floor, shattering with a loud bang. In that instant, it felt like time froze completely. All noise inside the room ceased. Through the small gap, I saw two dark heads snap toward my direction. I had no choice but to bolt. I spun around and sprinted down the stairs. Behind me, I heard shouting and footsteps pounding. Furniture scraped loudly as they rushed out after me, closing in fast. My heart felt like it was about to burst right out of my chest, and I could barely catch my breath. As I raced down to the second floor, I started shouting at the top of my lungs. "Burglar! There's a burglar in the house. Call the cops!" But the music was blaring so loudly that my voice just got drowned out. I kept bolting down the main staircase, the sound of footsteps still pounding after me. Then suddenly, I heard a loud crash behind me, like someone had fallen hard. One of the burglars had tripped and tumbled down, landing motionless at the bottom of the second-floor stairs. By now, my yelling had finally gotten the attention of some people downstairs. The music abruptly stopped, and everyone rushed toward the stairs, confused and panicked. In the chaos, I tried to explain there were burglars up in the attic. A few guys quickly headed upstairs to check, while others called the police. The thief who'd fallen was still alive, but had a nasty head injury and couldn't move. The other guy had disappeared, probably escaping through the same skylight they'd used to break in. About 15 minutes later, the cops arrived. I had to repeat the whole story at least 3 different times to multiple officers. When they searched the attic, they found a bag stuffed with jewelry, watches, and cash the thieves had swiped. But the captured burglar refused to give up his partner. The party ended on a grim note. Marcus and I finally left sometime after midnight, once the cops had taken our statements and contact details. On the drive back, I couldn't shake the memory of the escaped burglar's masked face. The eyes staring at me through the black mask had been cold, calculating, and filled with hatred. I can't go to parties anymore, not since that night. Every time I hear loud music or the laughter of a crowd, I see Jake lying on that gray sofa, his head resting against the backrest, as if he were just sleeping soundly. But the truth is, Jake wasn't sleeping at all. My name is Maya, and this story happened years ago. It was Dylan's 26th birthday, my best friend from college. Dylan threw a pretty big party at his house in Dallas, Texas. There were about 30 people with loud music, flashing lights, and the mingled smell of alcohol and cigarette smoke everywhere. I sat in a corner, just sipping my drink. I'm not a party person, but it was Dylan's birthday, so I still came. I probably would have left early if Jake hadn't shown up. Jake was my ex-boyfriend. We dated for a few months, but things ended badly. Jake was handsome, charming, and a bit of a player. I tried to break it off, but my feelings for him were so deep that I couldn't completely escape his influence. That night, Jake walked in with a hot girl. Their intimate gestures made it obvious she was his new girlfriend. I was even more surprised to learn that Jake and Dylan were high school friends. I watched Jake from a distance. He was laughing and talking with everyone, drinking, and seemed to be having a great time. His new girlfriend quickly blended into the party atmosphere too. I felt a strange emptiness inside. After a while, I saw him lying on the sofa near the corner of the room. He was leaning his head against the backrest, eyes closed. He must have had too much to drink, perhaps because of lingering feelings from the past. I couldn't take my eyes off Jake. Jake lay there for a very long time. I kept thinking, is he okay? A restless feeling welled up in me. I wanted to go over and check on him, but I felt a little hesitant, especially with Jake's new girlfriend there. "Jake's totally wasted," I said to a friend standing near me. She laughed loudly. "Just let him sleep. It's not the first time he's done that." Some others also brushed it off. They said Jake always drank a lot and slept that soundly. Time passed, and the party continued. I saw one guy who had too much to drink accidentally spill a whole can of beer on Jake's pants, but Jake still didn't move. The guy and his friends burst into laughter. "This dude's out cold." After that, I saw Jake's girlfriend sitting next to him, taking selfies. She pouted, posed intimately, and took a few pictures. People around them laughed and commented on the photos. Around 2 a.m., the party started to wind down, and most people had left. One of Jake's friends wanted to wake him up to leave together, jokingly called out loudly, and pushed him hard. Jake fell to the floor with a loud thud. Everyone was startled, but because they were under the influence, people's reactions were quite slow. I frantically rushed over to check on Jake. I put my hand to his nose. There was no breath. "Call 911!" I screamed, my voice trembling. Everyone suddenly sobered up. Someone called for an ambulance. Someone else tried to do CPR, but I knew it was too late. Jake's body was stiff and cold. The police and paramedics arrived. After a brief examination, they announced that Jake had been dead for at least 2 hours, probably since I first noticed something was off. The cause of death was determined to be a drug overdose combined with a brain hemorrhage. All of us who were left after the party were stunned. We had been partying, laughing, and taking selfies around a dead body for several hours without anyone knowing. We thought Jake was just deeply asleep, but he was actually dead. Jake's girlfriend sobbed uncontrollably when she learned the truth. She had kissed her boyfriend's cheek for a photo without knowing anything. She even posted those photos on social media. Dylan was also devastated, just sitting in a corner, his face in his hands. His birthday had turned into a tragedy. As for me, I felt more guilty than anyone. I had known something wasn't normal. I had watched him all night. But I didn't go near him because of the emotional baggage from the past. Maybe if I had pushed past those irrelevant feelings, Jake could have been saved. If I had been braver, maybe Jake wouldn't have died. But I didn't do anything. I let personal feelings cloud my judgment. A dead person lay there while we partied around him. Since then, I haven't been able to attend any parties. Every time I hear loud music, I see Jake lying on that sofa. Every time I see someone deeply asleep, I think of death. I live with that haunting memory to this day. I used to think a breakup was the end, but with Joe, it was just the beginning of something much scarier. It's been almost 3 years, and I still tremble whenever I remember that party. I can't sleep on quiet nights. The sound of the gunshot still echoes in my ears, and the screams still haunt me. In July of that year, I was invited to Jordan's graduation party. Jordan was our class president, and the party was at their house. I was pretty hesitant before accepting the invitation. I wasn't close to anyone in my class, worried that I wouldn't know what to say when I got there. But remembering my past relationship with my ex-boyfriend, Joe, I had lost so much freedom, so many relationships, and so much confidence. I had ended that control, and now it was time to get it all back. I arrived at the party, standing by the drink table, feeling a little awkward. Liz, right? I turned to see Jordan smiling. Jordan was tall and thin, with slightly curly brown hair and kind blue eyes. Hi, Jordan. Thanks for inviting me. I'm glad you came. You don't seem to go to parties very often. I nodded, unsure what to say. Jordan didn't ask further, just handed me a glass of orange juice. Do you want to go upstairs? It's a bit noisy down here. I hesitated a moment, then nodded. We went up to the second floor, into a small living room with a sofa and bookshelves packed with books. Jordan sat down, keeping a comfortable distance. We talked about college, about future plans. Jordan listened to me genuinely. I looked at Jordan, feeling my heart beat faster. There was something about them that made me feel safe. It was a feeling I had forgotten long ago. Liz, where are you? A shout from downstairs startled me. It was Joe's voice. My body froze, my hands began to tremble. Jordan looked at me with a bewildered expression. That's Joe, my ex-boyfriend I broke up with a few weeks ago. He's dangerous. Jordan placed a hand on my shoulder and squeezed gently. They told me to stay put, and then quickly went downstairs to handle the situation. But I couldn't sit still. I ran after Jordan. The noise and shouting from downstairs grew louder. When I reached the living room, I saw Joe there, his face flushed, his hands clenched. When he saw me, his eyes became wild. Jordan stepped forward, blocking him between me and Joe. You need to leave. This is my private home, and you're not invited, Jordan said in a firm voice. But Joe completely ignored them, his eyes fixed only on me. Come home right now. I shook my head. Joe stepped closer, his face distorted with rage. The heavy smell of alcohol radiated from him. You belong to me. Jordan still stood between me and Joe, clearly showing a protective stance. Joe reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a shiny black handgun. My blood ran cold. Jordan flinched, but still didn't move. Screams erupted from behind me. Everyone rushed out in a panic. Joe pointed the gun at Jordan. I lunged between them, but Jordan pushed me behind their back. They raised their hands, trying to calm Joe. We can talk. But Joe had lost all reason. He didn't let Jordan finish, and he suddenly pulled the trigger. The gunshot echoed. Jordan fell. The bullet lodged in their right shoulder. Blood poured out nonstop. Jordan's face was pale with pain. I felt like I died for a few seconds, and quickly knelt beside Jordan, pressing hard on the wound to stop the bleeding. Joe seemed to go insane. He lunged, grabbed my hair tightly, and pulled hard, ordering me to go with him. I struggled. Just then, the distant wail of police sirens filled the air. Someone had called the police. Joe looked around for an escape route, then ran. Paramedics rushed in. They bandaged Jordan's wound and got them into the ambulance. I followed closely. Joe was arrested by the police not long after, while trying to escape. At the hospital, surgeons removed the bullet from Jordan's shoulder. Luckily, the bullet didn't cause severe damage. I sat in the waiting room all night, staring at the white walls and feeling guilty. The trial took place a month later. Joe was convicted of assault with a deadly weapon and sentenced to 3 years in prison. But no sentence could erase the trauma and haunting memories. Jordan recovered. We still kept in touch, but there was a distance we both felt. I understand that true love never comes with control, possession, or violence. What Joe had for me wasn't love. It was an obsession with control. It took me too long to realize that. I'm still learning to live with those memories. But I know that silence only makes people like Joe more dangerous. So I decided to tell this story, hoping it will help someone else recognize the warning signs before it's too late. That graduation party ended, but the lessons from it will stay with me for the rest of my life. I'm Mia, 22, and a recent college graduate. I work at a coffee shop downtown, which is also where I met and started dating Matthew. Our first date was at a cozy Italian restaurant. After dinner, neither of us wanted the night to end, so Matthew suggested we go to a club a few blocks away. I was excited because I love to dance. The club was crowded, and we had a great time dancing for hours. While we were at the club, we met a man named Luke. He was confident and had a very charming demeanor. Luke introduced himself as Hot Tub Luke, a nickname I didn't think much of at the time, just found it a little odd. Luke invited us to a party at his house. A few other people around us also got invited and seemed excited. They all decided to share an Uber to Hot Tub Luke's place. I was thrilled, thinking it would be a great opportunity to make more friends and have new experiences. Matthew seemed a little hesitant, but I convinced him, and he went along with it. When we arrived, I was genuinely stunned by Luke's house. It was a large and modern 2-story home. Inside, everything was sleek and expensive. There was a huge living room, a full bar stocked with all kinds of liquor, and glass doors that led to the backyard with a hot tub. The party started quickly, the music was loud, and people started pouring drinks. I got swept up in the lively atmosphere. The hot tub was very popular, and people were readily taking off their outer clothes and jumping in. Even though I didn't get in the hot tub, I was having a great time dancing and talking to others. However, Matthew didn't get into the party as much as I did. He wasn't dancing a lot and kept looking around as if he was evaluating everything. I noticed Matthew watching Luke a few times, but I didn't think much of it. Around 2 a.m., when I was still having a blast, Matthew came over and said we should go home. I was surprised. Although it was late, the party was still going strong. I said I wanted to stay a little longer, but Matthew was firm. He said he was tired and didn't want to linger. I was a little annoyed and thought Matthew was spoiling the fun, but I didn't want to make a big deal out of it, so we called a taxi and left. The ride home was quiet. I was still buzzing with excitement, but Matthew seemed distracted. He didn't say much, just stared out the window. I figured he was just tired or didn't like parties. The next morning, I woke up to a phone call from an unknown number. I answered, and it was the police. They asked if I had attended a hot tub party the night before. I quickly confirmed that I had. The police asked me to come to the station to answer some questions, which left me confused. On the way to the station, my mind was racing. I had no idea what was going on, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. At the station, the officers were very serious. They asked about the party, such as when I got there, who I was with, and what I had seen. After that, they told me the reason for their call. A girl at the party had been sexually assaulted after Matthew and I left. The police didn't go into detail, but said the incident was very bad, and Luke was the perpetrator. I was in complete shock. I had been having the time of my life in a place where such a disgusting crime was happening. The police asked more questions about Luke, but I didn't know anything about him besides his charming and elegant demeanor. The officers added that they had found a lot of videos and pictures of parties and even Luke's crimes stored on his computer. This made me feel sick to my stomach. The man I thought was just a fun host was a predator, and I had been in his house completely unaware. Leaving the police station, I felt shaky. I couldn't stop thinking about how close I had come to something horrific. I felt stupid for not realizing it. But more than that, I couldn't stop thinking about Matthew. Thanks to Matthew's determination and caution, I was saved from something terrible. I texted Matthew as soon as I got home. He came over that afternoon, and I told him everything the police had said. Matthew looked pale, probably also in shock. I asked him why he was so insistent on leaving the party. Matthew said he didn't feel comfortable and didn't trust Luke. It was a gut feeling he had from watching how Luke acted. He was always hovering around the girls, encouraging them to chug their drinks. Matthew didn't want to scare me at the time, so he just said he was tired and wanted to go home. I hugged him and thanked him so much. In the following weeks, I followed the news about Luke. It turned out his real name was Chris. He had been doing this for years, hosting big parties, luring young girls, and then taking advantage of them. Chris finally went to court a few months later. I wasn't called as a witness, but I followed the case online. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. This brought a sense of justice, but it couldn't erase the harm he had caused. This incident changed the way I see seemingly harmless situations and the importance of being more careful with strangers. Matthew and I are doing very well. I'm so grateful to have him by my side. I'm 28 now, but I still remember a terrifying event that happened when I was 22 and in college. At the time, I was living in a pretty big house in Orlando, Florida, with a spacious yard and a large swimming pool. I lived with my parents, and both of them owned their own businesses and often traveled for meetings and conferences. One week in late August, when both my mom and dad were out of town, I asked for their permission and was allowed to invite a limited number of friends over for a pool party in the backyard. I was excited and surprised that my parents trusted me enough to host a small party. But my mom emphasized the promise of no alcohol, no loud music, and everyone going home at a reasonable hour so as not to disturb the neighbors. I called my 6 closest friends and told them about the pool party. I limited each person to 1 guest. Everyone accepted almost immediately, happy to come, and asked if they should bring snacks and drinks. Remembering my parents' instructions, I ignored their conditions and allowed my friends to bring alcohol. That night, most of my friends arrived. They wore colorful swimsuits and brought a lot of alcohol. My friends took turns playing music. They all brought their girlfriends or boyfriends, who I all knew, making a total of 13 people, including me. We lit a bonfire and started drinking, laughing, chatting, and snacking. After we had enough energy and a little buzz to get us in the mood, everyone started getting into the pool. I sat by the fire, watching them splash around, have fun, and felt proud as the host. The party went on for almost 2 hours longer than the time my parents had given. It was almost 11 p.m., and most people were still in the pool, listening to music, getting snacks, and more drinks. I went inside for a few minutes to get more alcohol when I heard a noise from the bushes on the side of the house. My house has a gate and security cameras all around, so security is pretty good, and I didn't pay much attention to the noise. I figured some of the couples were enjoying some private time. I went back to the backyard and stood by the pool, telling everyone it was almost time to end the party. That's when I realized that only 10 of the 12 guests were still in the pool, while the other 2 had disappeared. I went back inside, walked around, and heard laughter echoing from upstairs. In my drunk and tired state, I was too lazy to go upstairs and tell them it was time to go home. But before I could go back to the backyard to end the party, a horrifying scream suddenly ripped through the night air, coming from the pool. I rushed outside and was stunned by the sight. The water was stained red, and red streaks were spreading under the yellow light. My close friend was standing at the edge of the pool, his body trembling, yelling in a panic that his girlfriend was swimming when she was suddenly pulled underwater. She screamed and thrashed, and then blood started to spread everywhere. My other friends in the pool were swimming toward the edge in a panic, their faces pale with fear. And then, from the pool, a strange face suddenly surfaced. It was a man, probably in his late 20s, with long, wet hair. He was big, with several colorful tattoos on his muscular body. He jumped out of the pool, to the horror of everyone. Then, without a word, he ran straight through the backyard, across the lawn, and toward the front gate at an incredible speed. Some of my friends who were still sober quickly jumped out of the pool and tried to chase him, but by the time they got to the front gate, the stranger had vanished without a trace in the night. We all rushed to pull the injured girl out of the pool and take her inside. Blood was still flowing from the wound on her leg. It was a very deep and long cut on her calf. The couple from upstairs heard the screams and also rushed downstairs, their faces scared as they asked what was going on. My hands were shaking as I locked the door and called 911 for an ambulance. When the police and paramedics arrived a few minutes later, they quickly checked the injured girl's condition and carefully put her in the ambulance. My remaining friends left the house one by one in silence. They were still terrified by what they had just witnessed, and they all shook their heads in confusion, unable to believe what had happened. The police and I looked at the footage from the security camera system around the house. To my surprise, we discovered that the moment I heard the rustling in the bushes on the side of the house was when the stranger appeared. Somehow, he had found a way to get past my family's fence and security gate without triggering any alarms. On the screen, we saw him sneaking through the garden on the side of the house, then calmly walking into the backyard as if he were also an invited guest. Finally, he silently got into the pool. I was so irresponsible for having fun and being drunk that I didn't bother to check the surveillance system. I accidentally created an opportunity for a stranger to break into the house, and such a serious incident happened. I gave the footage to the police, but to this day, they have not been able to identify the intruder. And of course, when my parents came back, they found out what had happened. I received very strict punishments from them and was never allowed to host a party at home again. I'm Glenda, 32 years old. I am a single mother and have a little daughter named Alita who is 4 years old. My daughter and I live happily in a small house in Boston near the Atlantic coast. I am working as a nursing staff for a local hospital. The income is decent, so I can give Alita a full life. Alita is my anchor in life, and the best thing I have. She helped me get through a terrible time 4 years ago. 4 years ago, I married Stephen. My ex-husband is 3 years older than me and is a rich businessman. He is famous for his love of flowers. I followed my friend's advice and gave my absolute love and trust to Stephen. We live in a large house in the city of Philadelphia, over 300 miles from my current residence. 5 months after the wedding, I found out I was pregnant. Stephen was extremely happy when he heard the news. He burst into tears and hugged me. Stephen took very good care of me, giving all the good things to me and the baby in my belly. At the 20th week of pregnancy, my husband and I discussed organizing a party to guess the baby's gender. After consulting with the doctor about my health condition and some related issues, my husband and I excitedly prepared for the party from the colors and decoration themes of the party, games and activities, along with gifts for guests. I asked the doctor to write down the baby's gender on a piece of paper and give it to my best friend to prepare the cake. The party takes place at 8 p.m. at the swimming pool behind the house. The couple's relatives and guests all came. My husband has many important friends and partners. There are people I have never met before, but out of politeness, I still greeted them happily. I'm impressed with a girl named Maria. Maria is so beautiful. She said she is also pregnant at 20 weeks. We shared a lot about our pregnancy story, but I couldn't see Maria's belly clearly, probably because the white dress she was wearing was quite loose. A happy atmosphere covered the party. Stephen and I held hands and stood in the center. I can feel the baby in my belly is also happy and kicking gently. The main part of the party is announcing the baby's gender. Everyone was excited and nervous. Small cakes were prepared for each guest. The cake that reveals the baby's gender will have a different color filling than the rest. I was quite surprised when the cake sample was very different from the sample my best friend sent me to see. But it's not too important, so I happily ignore it. Everyone raises their head and counts to 3 to simultaneously break the cake in half. I was quite nervous and shaking, so I was a little slower than everyone else. Everyone's cakes and Stephen's were all blue. When I broke the cake in my hand, a red liquid shot out, causing me to scream in surprise. Everyone cheered and congratulated. Pink confetti shot up behind my husband and I. My baby is a girl. Stephen happily hugged me, but I didn't react because I smelled a very fishy smell. My hands are covered in blood from the cake. From inside the cake, a baby's tiny hand fell out. Everyone was surprised. The atmosphere was quiet. My heart beat very fast. The smell of blood and that horrible image made me dizzy. Suddenly, a loud, crazy laugh caught everyone's attention. From below the guests, the girl Maria just stepped forward, looking at my husband and me with angry eyes. "What do you think, Stephen?" "That's your baby. It's also a girl, and it's 20 weeks. She pointed to the infant's hand on the ground. I turned to look at my husband with puzzled eyes. Stephen looked at me confused and shouted angrily at Maria, "Shut! Whoever allowed you to be here, go away." Maria laughed loudly again, looking like she had lost her mind. She opened the bag in her hand and pulled out a child's body the size of a large banana from inside and held it up high. Everyone at the party panicked. I held my stomach so shocked that I couldn't stand. I fainted. Before my eyes is a scary black shadow. Suddenly there was the sound of children crying. The space before my eyes was spinning. The baby's cry echoed and persisted. The newborn baby's face had wide open eyes, red skin, and a big smile with a dark shadow deep inside. I jumped up in surprise and quickly touched my stomach. Surely my girl's still here with me. I was in the hospital. My mother, sitting next to the bed, burst into tears when she saw me wake up. After leaving the hospital, I understood everything clearly. Maria is Steven's lover. He was with that girl the whole time he loved and married me. Maria and I got pregnant at the same time, when asked to provide and take responsibility for the baby from Maria. Steven beat Maria, even though she was pregnant with his child. Maria had a miscarriage and suffered from severe emotional turmoil. I filed a lawsuit against Steven in court. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison. I moved to Boston to live, and all the time after that, I had nightmares about the newborn until Elida was born. The two of us are living a peaceful and happy life. Sometimes I wonder if that night I had just stood up, stepped out, and said something to defend him. Would things have been different? That evening was still a warm summer party. It's just that we didn't know the laughter that night would create tears and harm for a small family. Last summer, I received an invitation to Ben's housewarming party. He had just moved into a new neighborhood in Austin, Texas. To celebrate moving, Ben hosted a barbecue, inviting his close friends and colleagues. The party started at 6 p.m., the air filled with the smell of grilled meat under the sunset. About 20 people attended the party, their laughter echoing throughout the yard. At first, everything was great. We chatted, drank beer, and enjoyed delicious grilled steak. But as the party went on, everyone had quite a bit to drink and started losing control. Around 8 p.m., a thin man appeared at the back door. He was wearing wrinkled clothes, looked tired, and his hair was a bit messy. "Hi, I'm Sam. I live across the street. Could you guys please keep it down a bit?" "My daughter can't sleep," he said in a gentle voice. Everyone's eyes looked at Sam with annoyance. Someone whispered, "Grumpy old man." I couldn't help but feel annoyed too. I thought he was just a difficult neighbor trying to spoil our fun party. After Sam left, everyone continued drinking, and the noise level rose again. Some guests started making fun of Sam's appearance. "He looks like he just slept under a bridge," one of Ben's colleagues said and laughed. "Probably so poor he can't afford new clothes," another person chimed in. Around 9 p.m., Sam appeared for the second time. This time he looked more stressed. "I already asked you guys to lower your voices. My daughter really can't sleep." But instead of apologizing, a few drunk people started laughing loudly and openly mocking him. Sam stood there for a moment, his face red, then turned and walked away. I saw his hands trembling. 15 minutes later, Sam came back for the third time. "Party pooper!" someone yelled and threw a cup towards Sam. Others started yelling and throwing trash towards Sam. Ben stepped forward and threatened him with a very rude finger point directly at his face. "This is my party." "You're not welcome here. Get out." This time, I could feel genuine anger in his eyes. Sam clenched his fists so hard his body trembled, then quietly left. After Sam left, the party became even more chaotic. Everyone continued drinking, and some even deliberately threw trash over the fence into Sam's yard. I felt uncomfortable with these actions but didn't intervene. Then the worst thing happened. Rick, a mutual friend of mine and Ben's, had too much to drink. He insisted on driving home even though everyone tried to stop him. Rick stumbled out to his car, started the engine, and instead of backing out into the street, he floored the gas pedal. The car sped forward, crashed through the fence, drove across Sam's yard, and ran over a few things before stopping. When we ran out to see, I saw a pink child's bicycle completely crushed under the car's wheels. Some people were shocked by the incident, while others, due to their drunkenness, became excited and laughed at Rick's actions. Sam's front door opened, and a little girl ran out, looked at the bicycle, and burst into uncontrollable tears. The air around us fell silent. All eyes turned towards the little girl. Sam appeared right after. His face was terribly distorted. "This was my daughter's birthday present." "I worked extra hours to buy it," Sam said in an angry voice. Rick, instead of apologizing, sneered, "Then just buy a new one." That was the last straw. Sam suddenly screamed and lunged at Rick. He punched Rick repeatedly in the face while screaming words that were indistinguishable. It took 3 men to pull Sam off before Rick could escape. He lay unconscious in the yard, blood all over his face. The police arrived after 15 minutes. They arrested Sam and took Rick to the hospital. While waiting, I overheard a conversation between the police and other neighbors. Sam was a single father, working 2 jobs, a day shift at an auto repair shop and a night shift at a warehouse. He dedicated all his income to raising his 6-year-old daughter. The pink bicycle was a birthday gift he had just given his daughter, and she cherished it more than anything. When I heard this information, I suddenly sobered up. I remembered Sam's tired eyes, his wrinkled clothes because he had just gotten off work, his soft voice when he asked us to keep it down. Sam wasn't a weirdo. He was a worried and loving father to his daughter. Rick recovered after 2 weeks, but Sam had to face legal consequences for his violent actions. He was sentenced to 6 months in jail and had to do community service. I don't know what happened to his daughter during that time. I can't forget the little girl's cries that night. It was the cry of a child who had just lost something most precious, not due to an accident, but due to the cruelty and ignorance of adults. That was a lesson I learned about not judging others by their appearance and circumstances. I am Julia, 22 years old, a girl who used to live life to the fullest with endless parties. Music, alcohol, and loud laughter were the things that made me feel free, unbound. I have many friends, but most of them are just people I've met through a few parties. I didn't care much, because to me, life was about enjoying every moment. Until that fateful night that changed everything. That day, I accepted an invitation to a party from Richard, a guy I had just met the day before at the bar. He had a dazzling smile and a gaze that knew how to capture attention. Richard offered, and I did not hesitate to accept. I was used to invitations like that. No need to think too much about it. My memories after that shattered, as if someone had turned off the switch in my mind. The last thing I remember is holding a cocktail, with the thumping music making it nearly impossible to hear anyone's conversation. A wave of dizziness hit, and then everything went dark. I woke up with a headache pounding like a hammer. A burning sensation ran all over my body, as if every muscle had been tortured. When I opened my eyes, I found myself curled up in a bush, trying to look closely at my surroundings, which were by the side of a highway. The cold wind sliced into my skin, making me shiver. I raised my hand and slapped my head a few times to wake myself up. Looking at my body, the short dress was dirty and torn to pieces. No phone, no purse, nothing at all. I sat up, my body trembling and my mind spinning. While being in a state of panic, I couldn't recall what had happened. A terrible feeling rose in my chest. A flood of questions about what I had been through, what horrible things had happened. All those questions spiraled deep into my mind, but there were no answers. I stood up, staggering toward the highway, with a faint hope of finding someone to help. Standing by the roadside, I waved at the first car that passed. Luckily, the sleek black car slowly came to a stop. The window rolled down, and a young man looked at me with a curious gaze, asking what I needed help with. I quickly ran over, almost begging him to give me a ride. The man gave me a brief, evaluating look, then smiled lightly and agreed. I sighed in relief, feeling that I still had a bit of luck left. But just a few minutes after the car started moving, I realized I had made a mistake. He asked a few questions, and I naively told him everything about my situation. No one knew I was here, no money or phone, no way to protect myself. He suddenly fell silent for a moment, then burst into laughter, a laugh that sent a chill down my spine. "You have nice breasts. Hey, what color is your underwear?" His voice was slippery and disgusting. I froze, my heart pounding so hard I thought I could hear it in my chest. I stared at him, and he reached out and placed his hand lightly on my knee, his fingers sliding in a sickly, slow motion. Instinct surged within me. Without thinking, I forcefully pushed his hand away and pulled the handbrake abruptly. The car jerked to a stop, the tires screeching against the road. I opened the door and rushed straight out. He shouted loudly behind me, but I didn't dare look back. On the side of the road was a small forest, dark and dense. I used all my remaining strength to run desperately into the forest, ignoring the branches hitting my face, ignoring the pain from the high heels digging into my feet. I didn't dare stop, didn't dare look back. I didn't know how far I had run until my legs felt like they were being torn apart, and my lungs felt like they were about to explode. I knelt down in the bushes, hiding in the darkness, tears streaming down my face. In the distance, I heard him call out, his voice full of menace. "Where are you, bitch? I'll just lick you once." I held my breath, clutching my body, praying for protection from God. A moment later, the sound of the car door slamming shut was followed by the roar of the engine as the car sped off. I still didn't dare move, unable to believe that everything was over. I sat there until the sunlight filtered through the tree branches, and the silence enveloped the entire forest. As the sun rose higher, I crawled my way out of the forest. I stood by the roadside, my clothes dirty and torn, my eyes sore from crying all night. I raised my hand to flag down another car, and this time, I swore I would only trust women. A middle-aged woman stopped. When she saw me, she opened the car door, her eyes filled with concern. I got into the car, my body still trembling. She asked if I was okay, but I couldn't answer. I was completely exhausted. A few days later, I was hospitalized for a health checkup. I needed to know if something had happened to my body, whether I had been assaulted or injected with something. The results showed that I had not been violated, but that didn't ease the haunting thoughts in my mind. That event changed me forever. I was no longer the girl chasing after meaningless parties, no longer trusting strangers just because they smiled at me. I understood that my own safety was the most important thing. I felt lucky to have survived, but I also hated myself for the naivety that had led me into that terrifying situation. That lesson I will never forget. I had changed. No more party nights, no more impulsive decisions. I chose a different lifestyle, one that I could control, so that I would never have to face the fear I felt that day again. There were 3 decisions in my life that saved me: refusing to leave my phone in the car, lying about my home address, and trusting my gut feeling. Without them, I'd probably just be a name in a local news report, a student who disappeared after an end-of-school-year party. I'm Logan. A few months ago, I went with my friend Greg to a party celebrating the end of our first year of high school. It was at the house of someone he knew. I wasn't on the guest list, but Greg swore it would be fine if I just tagged along. On the way there, I asked Greg for a ride home after the party because I knew I'd be drinking, and he agreed. When we arrived, it was past 10 p.m. Greg led me to the backyard, where the party was in full swing. Groups of people were gathered, drinking, smoking, and even trying things I'd only seen in movies. Greg told me to just chill and meet people. Everyone was about our age. He quickly disappeared into the crowd. I talked to a few people and had a couple of drinks, but I made sure to stay away from anything that looked suspicious. Around 1 a.m., I started feeling lightheaded, and my vision got blurry. Leaning against a wall to steady myself, I checked my watch and knew I needed to leave the party right away. I looked everywhere for Greg, but couldn't find him. I asked a few people, but everyone just shook their heads. I reached into my pocket for my phone and realized it was dead. Greg had completely vanished, leaving no message. I didn't know if he was too drunk or if he simply forgot I was there. I felt a little annoyed, but I also knew Greg was usually pretty carefree. He was probably just caught up in the fun. Since I didn't know anyone well enough to ask for a ride, my only option was to walk home. Then I thought about hitchhiking. I stood by the side of the road, thumb out, hoping someone would stop. After quite a while, just as I was about to give up, a gray pickup truck pulled over. I quickly walked over. The driver was an older man who asked if I needed a ride. I nodded, and he invited me in. As the truck started moving, I thanked the man, but then he asked why I was walking alone at that hour. I could only manage a few answers because my head was still spinning. When the truck turned onto the street near my house, my stomach suddenly twisted with an uneasy feeling I couldn't explain. When the truck drove past my house without stopping, I immediately spoke up, but the man stayed silent and kept driving. He stopped the truck at the end of the street, turned to look at me with a creepy smile, and slowly said, "You shouldn't hitchhike when you're drunk." Right after that, he locked the doors automatically. I was startled, twisting the handle, but it wouldn't open. He chuckled softly and reached out to stroke my hair. His rough hand made me shiver. I recoiled, pressing myself against the door, trying to stay calm. When he reached for his jacket pocket, I wasn't sure what he was grabbing. I immediately screamed, "Stop!" I kicked hard at the dashboard. He cursed and pulled his hand from his jacket, but he still didn't unlock the doors. At that moment, I couldn't think anymore. All I could do was punch the window wildly, kick the seat, and yell like crazy. And just as my voice went hoarse, a piercing siren wailed, and flashing blue and red lights reflected in the rearview mirror. It was the police, thankfully. He panicked and unlocked the door. I immediately opened the truck door and bolted towards the police car. The police officer got out, and I practically fell into him. When we both turned back, the truck was gone. I told him everything, and the officer said they were looking for a gray truck driver. He was a suspect in an armed robbery. I wasn't sure if it was the same person who picked me up, but the only thing I was certain of was that if the police hadn't arrived just in time, I probably wouldn't be here to tell this story. After that experience, I promised myself I would never let myself get into a similar situation. If I drink, I'll drink responsibly. I'll always make sure my phone is charged, and I'll go with friends. But most importantly, I learned to listen to my gut. As for Greg, he said he was busy talking to a girl and forgot about me. I believe he didn't do it on purpose. Greg isn't a bad person. He's just a fun-loving teenager. But sometimes, carelessness can put others in unexpectedly dangerous situations.